Welcome back to the DJ Sessions, where we feature the best DJs and producers from around the world. I'm your host, Darren, and right now I'm sitting in the virtual studios in Seattle, Washington, and coming in all the way halfway around the world, but kind of close to Antarctica from Cape Town, South Africa. I have none other than Nick Raubenheimer, aka Protoculture, aka Centrifuge, aka Shadow Chronicles, on the DJ Sessions presents the virtual sessions. Nate, how's it going today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. I just want to start out by saying one thing, and this is a quote that kind of blew me away in doing some research. Everything he touches turns to musical gold. Armin van Buuren, State of Trance. That is one of the biggest accolades I think I have seen in a long time in interviewing DJs and producers. And what was that like when you see Armin say something like that about you and your style of work and what you do?
Oh, well, I mean, we milked that in marketing for a couple of years. It was a great quote from him. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's really nice to get that sort of, that sort of quote from somebody of his stature and his accomplishments, for sure. But I mean, I've known him for a couple of years, and he's a super nice guy as well. You know, it's not, and I try not to, listen to that kind of thing or let that affect me too much. But obviously, it's super sweet and really nice to get that sort of acclaim as well.
Absolutely, and you don't just produce under Protoculture; you produce under Nate Raubenheimer, Centrifuge, Shadow Chronicles. Tell us more about what styles you produce under those other aliases other than Protoculture.
Yeah, well, the Centrifuge thing, I mean, that I did a couple of tracks a number of years ago, and I was experimenting with more progressive stuff, and that's really where Protoculture's at the moment. I mean, Protoculture started off 20 years ago doing psytrance, but sort of very uplifting, used to call them like morning psytrance stuff. So very melodic and a lot of like influences from the sort of more commercial trance scene. And then I kind of moved into doing sort of more mainstream uplifting trance, which was always a big influence for me, but kind of, I don't sit still very long in one particular genre. I don't do well with that. So I did sort of 10 years of psytrance, then went into the commercial, or not, I hate that word, more uplifting trance. And then kind of just went back into doing the psytrance stuff again with Shadow Chronicles, and I've kind of stopped that for a little while now again, while I'm taking Protoculture in a more progressive direction. So Centrifuge has kind of become Protoculture now, essentially. So it was always supposed to be the three of those, and then the one's kind of fallen by the wayside.
And you're in your studio right now. Is this your main studio or your home studio?
Yeah, it's my studio at home. So I've been working out of this. I used to have a studio in sort of downtown Cape Town, a commercial studio. We used to do some sort of work for film and television stuff as well. My old partner actually went on to LA after a while, and he's working for Hans Zimmer and those guys. And he just did Deadmau5's Where's the Drop? I did all the orchestration for that. So we had that studio, and then I moved out of there and then worked from home. So it's way more comfortable for me working from here as well.
And I recently saw a short video that you did trying out Bitwig. Was that taken? It looks like it was taken in your home studio. I can kind of tell by the different angles that you were making that with your phone in the studio.
Yeah. So I actually shoot a lot of video in the studio. I have a YouTube channel called Marilla Music, which is also considered a sound design company that I have doing presets for synths and stuff. And then I also do quite a bit of work now, especially during the whole COVID thing, because I've been traveling with Sonic Academy. So I'm one of their guest lecturers, and I've been doing quite a lot of lecturing for them. So that's hence the camera setup and stuff. We did some live streaming during COVID. I was never really much into the DJing live stream thing, but I have been, streaming a lot of like production stuff from the studio. But yeah, that was just from the phone, the Bitwig thing, and we'll see how that goes. I'm really enjoying it at the moment. It's very cool.
Are you more of a hardware or software producer, or both?
More recently, I'm very much software. I mean, I had my old studio. I had a and a full O2R mixer with a bunch of outboard gear attached to that, 6 or 7 hardware synths in the studio as well, which I regret selling immensely, but I stopped using them after a while. So the ease of use with stuff now, and Bitwig especially, the stuff that you can do is just painstakingly difficult to do in hardware. But I have just the new additions to the studio. I just put in this machine and the Native Instruments S61, which works really well with Bitwig. So I'm trying to get a little bit more hands-on with my production at the moment, just with lots of controllers and stuff instead. So still software-based, but trying to do things a little bit less with a mouse and keyboard and more with a controller.
What is the best piece of gear that you own that you couldn't do without?
I always joke about it. This chair I'm sitting on, it's the studio chair. It's a Herman Miller. I got it about 16 years ago, and it's the one thing that I absolutely cannot do without in the studio, aside from the computer.
You're making me jealous. I got some little old hand-me-down from Target for like $50 right now that I've been using for years. I'm waiting until I upgrade to the full-on studio and green screen room. I'm waiting for a building to open up. But yeah, the chair I could see is one of the most important assets because you are literally glued to it for hours and hours and hours.
Oh, yeah. I spend in excess of 12 hours a day sitting here. So it's pretty important to me.
And how long does it take you on average to finish a production?
It depends. Depends on what I'm working on. Some of the weird thing with the time that it takes to write a track is sometimes, actually more often than not, the ones that have done really, really well for me, I've written in about 6 hours. And the ones which I was super proud of, which nobody seemed to like, those have taken me like multiple days, like weeks or months or something to finish. But typically the ones that you kind of get out really quickly are the ones that do well. I did a segment for Sonic Academy recently on this as well, just the sort of art of finishing music and how important it is to, get stuff from up here onto this as quickly as possible, because it really sort of conveys your ideas a lot better, and it does show. I mean, there's a sort of vibe that comes across in the music when you can let that flow seamlessly between your productions and your thoughts.
How far away is your studio located from your bedroom? And do you wake up in the middle of the night and say, I got to go finish that right now before I lose it?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a nocturnal being. I mean, I usually get to bed at about 2-3 in the morning, and then I've got a kid, so I'm up again at 7 to do the school drop off. So yeah, I don't sleep much, but I always have been like that. I suppose the immense amounts of caffeine also attribute to that as well.
And learning all this gear, technology over the years, going from analog to digital, did you have any formal training with this, or were you kind of just sink or swim, jump in and start playing with it and then slowly learn it over time? Or did you take classes in it, or how did you?
I do have a degree in audio engineering, but I will say that, audio production, it's a bit like working with coding. You can learn the basics, but the problem is you get your degree and a year down the line there's a new language that you've got to learn, and then everything you've done is null and void. So the trick to it is just obsessively obsessing over it all the time and just practice. And you need a real interest in it. And a lot of the stuff that I've learned is just from just trying things and copying as well. So, I often, will dissect somebody else's music and try and get that sound, and then, lock that away as a set of tools that I can employ again later on. But yeah, it's just a lot of time spent in the studio, really. And then I've had quite a bit of experience working on other productions and stuff. I worked in media with sort of advertising stuff. I've done loads of radio jingles and stuff. I worked on live sound rigs when I first started out, doing a lot of the sort of live sound for some of the big bands and stuff when they were down in South Africa. A lot of that was just carrying speakers and stuff at that stage. But yeah, you live and you learn through all of that. And then more recently, you know, I work as well with KVR Audio, so websites. So I'm quite hands-on with a lot of the developers as well. I do a lot of beta testing for guys like UVI, Plugin Alliance, a bunch of those guys. Steinberg, I work with them as well quite often. So I've, you know, it's my life dealing with like audio software and audio technology. So.
And are you also a mind reader? Because that was going to be my next question, was to ask you about KVR Audio and your involvement with KVR Audio. Tell us about KVR Audio.
So KVR Audio, there's listeners that don't know it. I mean, they're sort of one of the sort of biggest news outlets for anything sort of audio production related, along with the gear space and stuff. KVR Audio is a little bit different in that they've got this sort of immense product catalog, which is really cool. You can go and research plugins and stuff there, which is really nice. So my involvement there was pretty much at the start of COVID. I had no idea what was going on. And for somebody that for 20 years or 18 years at the time, my entire income has been based around, you know, having shows to play at. So I put feelers out. I'd already kind of started at the stage of my life, you know, I started looking around at you know, various other avenues as well, because I don't want to be 50 and traveling every day. But, you know, I started doing the sound design stuff, and this, you know, I saw an ad pop up on the site, got in touch with them, and we really hit it off. And so I manage a lot of their marketing and their dealing with a lot of the promoters as well at KVR Audio now, which is great for me. You know, it gives me a lot of access to pretty interesting people as far as audio software developers are concerned, and access to a lot of really cool toys and stuff ahead of release schedules and so on.
All those cool toys. You know, it reminded me when I went to the site, I was doing some research on you. Back in the day, my minute little stint of getting into music production. And when I say minute, I mean very minute. I owned a Roland MC505 and a Roland SP808, and I would go into Guitar Center.
I had a 303.
303.
Yeah, the bigger version. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just go into Guitar Center and sit in there for I was in there for like 7 or 8 months, and I just grabbed the manual. They'd let me sit down. They'd let me play with it. And then finally I just dropped, you know, I think it was a couple grand on that one and a couple grand on the other piece. And I'd bring it over to my friend's house, and I'd be making cool stuff with this MIDI controller, sampler, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, you know. But this was in like 2000, almost 2001, 2001, 2002. And, you know, computers weren't really there. They were there, but they weren't really there yet in the sense of music production computers. So, you know, it was always, there was a lot of hardware based gear to do all this stuff from. And you're right, connecting it all together. I was playing with MIDI when I was a kid. At 8 years old, my dad financed a studio for my brothers. They were in a rock band and a punk rock band, but he bought them all this gear and stuff, but they didn't like to read at all. So I'd get in the studio and I'd pick up these manuals that are translating from, you know, basically Japanese to English. And I'm reading up on MIDI at 8 years old, going, oh, plug this in here and do this here. And you hit this button here and see how it does this trigger here. And they're like, what are you doing playing with our equipment? Get out of our room. You know? So I always had that technical, the gravitation towards the technical side of things, of hooking gear up, putting things together and playing with it ever since I was a child. So, you know, but to see it all now come into a computer kind of element.
It's pretty insane what you can do now. Because I mean, I was pretty much in the same boat. My first sequencer I had ran in MS-DOS.
Oh, yeah.
Off a floppy disk, so you had to put that in. You'd put up the computer MS-DOS, then you'd have a second drive. You put in the app, and then it was just like blocks and stuff. That, and then I had one of those MC303s, which were really cool. I mean, my first live show that I did, I think was 2001 in Glastonbury. I had a Roland hard disk recorder, which was pretty cutting edge tech at the time. But it was 16 channels, so I didn't have a laptop at that stage. It was too expensive for me. So used to record 16 channels, and you'd run out of channels, and then you'd have to bounce them all down to one, and then you'd have 15 again to do the other stuff, and then bounce them down again. And so it was totally different. I mean, nowadays, I mean, you look at like Cubase, for example, they've got like mobile versions which you can run on your phone. And the tech on there is insane compared to what we had 20 years ago.
You mentioned that a couple of years ago, your primary source of income was doing tours, going around the world, and doing that for so long. Do you think that at clubs, nightclubs, and other dance events, should people look at DJs like they are the rock stars, or would it be more fun if DJs were a little bit slightly more anonymous and just part of the bigger event?
Yeah, so I mean, like I've become slightly more jaded recently, like especially after COVID, that I've been out of it for a little while. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a part of me which misses the big festivals and the adoration that you get from a crowd, like a big crowd. There's something special to that, and I've done it and I've enjoyed it. But I think for me at the moment, and it's reflective of the music that I'm into at the moment now as well, is I'm kind of moving more away from that the sort of ego-driven social media aspect of music. I'm just not all that interested in it. I'm this is part of the thing with me with the whole COVID thing is because I've branched out into doing other things. It's kind of given me a lot of freedom to not give a shit about the gigs paying the bills at the end of the month. So it's had a knock-on effect that a lot of my music, I don't base my music on can this get a crowd dancing. So I'm kind of at the space now where I want to DJ and I do want to play to crowds, but it's really not about playing to big crowds. It's really not about projecting your ego onto a crowd. It's more just about doing something beautiful and interesting. And that's what I love about the progressive stuff. It's lacking a lot of that sort of that energy that people can rely on to get a crowd, with their hands in the air. And to get it right, you've really got to nail that piece of music because you don't have that sort of big drop to fall back on, that's where my head's at the moment. So yeah, I'm definitely more in the camp that I don't necessarily want to be seen at all. I mean, part of me does. I mean, everybody's got an ego, and part of me wants to be front and center. But I think a bigger part of me at the moment doesn't really care about that as much as I used to.
I can totally relate to that in the sense of I recently just became a DJ myself, but I only play one on live streams. It was kind of a thing where I had to start pinch hitting. If a DJ of mine couldn't show up for a show, I had to fill in. And so I actually went and said, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to make myself a profile as a resident DJ on our page and start playing and getting up on stage. And, I've been up on stage before my whole life, but I was always from a technical side of things doing video. So I was never nervous getting up on stage and being in front of people, but they weren't cheering for me. They were cheering for the DJ. So being out there and just playing, I mean, whether I'm playing to 20 people or 200 people, I'm in front of the crowd and they're cheering. There is that boost of, woo, you're doing something right up there and you're making the room and making people feel good. And I'm just so funny that I've been doing this show for almost 12 years and I've been in the electronic music scene for 30 years of my life, but I've never learned how to DJ. And I've never wanted that spotlight, let alone, it's so funny. I'm hosting this show and doing the interview with you. I never was supposed to be on camera, being in front of the camera and have people like talking to me and fan mail coming in and all this stuff. And it is a little hard to let that go, which I'm going to eventually. Maybe eventually I'll pass the mic, but again, I can totally understand why you'd want to go more behind the scenes, more in the back end. That's where I like to thrive as an executive producer. I'm better doing my stuff over here rather than be in front of the camera. Let the people who want to be in front of the camera and be in the stage, let them do that. Yeah. Let me do the production in the background.
Yeah. I was sorry.
I was just going to ask, I was going to say, have you ever gotten shy in a situation or nervous about getting on stage and or while you're on stage getting nervous?
It's an odd thing for me because I'm not an outgoing person. I'm not a super social person either. And consciously the thought of being on stage terrifies me. But a weird thing happens to me when I get up there and I usually just kind of forget about it because for me it is quite an honest thing that I'm doing. I do it because I enjoy the music that I'm playing, not for any other reason most of the time. And I tend to get lost in that very quickly. So it doesn't show, I don't think, when I am playing. But I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the the rush that comes with it. I don't know if I sort of pine after it all the time.
And as a DJ, do you follow the charts or on what's hot and what's not, or do you just follow your heart and what you feel, what you want to play to the audience?
Well, I mean, I used to, and you know, part of being a DJ is, I mean, this is kind of twofold thing, and it's something that I've always found that I'm constantly wrestling with as well, because on one side of it, you know, people are paying, you know, especially when you're getting flown around the world to play a show. There's a large part of it where people are expecting you to do what you known for as a producer, but there's another side of it completely where, as a DJ, you go so far to project what you want, but there's a point that you're going to hit at some point where you need to make sort of a conscious decision as to what's going to work properly next, rather than just doing what you think is or what you want to do all the time. So I mean, like, I generally 80% of the time I'll play tracks that I feel resonate with me in some way or another. But from a technical side, you know, there's gaps in a set where you're picking something that you might not be the biggest fan of, but it creates a link which is going to tell the story better, you know. So there's always that constant battle between, you know, what's the right thing to do personally and what's the right thing to do technically for a set as well. And you talking about, you know, going through tracks and stuff. I mean, I've been rubbish lately, but I used to be pretty good at keeping up with a lot of the new stuff. And yeah, I guess I still do. You know, I used to go through promos quite often, and yeah, I think you have to. You know, I was quite good at categorizing stuff, so I'd have sort of fillers for certain places. And I tend to mix like very up and down a lot of the time. I'm not a big fan of sets that kind of sit the same speed the whole way through. So I like having these little pockets where everything's kind of organized into different types of energies and different types of tempos and so on and so on. So.
I have wonder right now, do you have a remote desktop into my computer that is letting you see my questions that I'm going to roll out? Because you just hit like 2 topics, almost, I think 3 topics of what I want to talk with you about. And I was like, it happens from time to time on interviews. It's just, I love the way the flow goes, because I'm like, you're leading right into my next question. That's awesome.
You can shoot. I'll elaborate on that if you want.
Well, no, one of the things you brought up, and I'll go back to this one because I was trying to remember everything that you were talking about. But when you say about having that freedom, it brings me back to this time. It was 2013. We're doing the show in the studio. I invited George Acosta to come by and play a guest mix on the show. He walks in the studio, and the first thing is he says, I don't want to go to my nightclub gig tonight. I'd rather just stay here and play with you guys. I mean, not that he hated where he's going. He loved going and playing his set, but it was like, this is really cool. He didn't expect it to be like this. And then he said, okay, so what genre of music do you want me to play? What do you want me to play? And I'm like, hey, the show is, the hour is yours. You play what you want to play. And he goes, you mean I don't have to do my original stuff that I always play in the clubs? I said, no, play whatever you want. He goes, now I want to stay here even more, you know, and just giving that freedom, because you do get locked into that. What do people expect? And what do I get to do? And when do you decide when those two can be played? It's if they're expecting you to be on tour and they're expecting to see what they've seen, all the commercial, what they've been listening to for months, they're expecting to hear that drop, you know, that song come in. So I totally commend. I can see, you know, that you can get locked in to that kind of predispositioned, this is what a canned response almost. Yeah. It's like, oh, I just did this one again. Oh, I just did this one again. When do you get to play your freedom on it? And I think it was Benny Benassi. I was talking to him one time on stage. He had played a show here, like the 3rd time he'd been on the show. And he told me he tests his tracks out on the audience. And he'll have like 11 different versions or something like that of a song, and he'll play this one in Seattle and this one in Portland. It'll be the same track, but just little different versions of, to see what the audience response is like, to start testing out new stuff. And I thought that was interesting. So do you use the audience as a test bed as well, like that?
Yeah. So I mean, I used to do that quite often, because that's actually, and that's a stage of the track's sort of lifespan where I'm still pretty excited about it, because I haven't sort of figured out what the response is from it yet, and it's still fresh in my mind. I've been booked because of the Psytron stuff that I used to do years back. I every now and then I'll get a show where somebody wants me to play like the old stuff, and And I completely respect that. I mean, people have this sort of emotional attachment to specific music for specific reasons. The one thing I always struggle with, though, is it's a bit like a magic trick. You watch somebody doing a magic trick, and it's super cool, it's fantastic. You're like, oh my god, how did you do that? And then they tell you how the magic trick is. Like, come on, that's really stupid. That's so simple, you know. And that's kind of the same thing with playing my old stuff as well. As a producer, I've spoiled all the fun for myself. I know how the kick was made. I know how the bass line was made. There's no magic left in it for me anymore. I mean, there's definitely a part of me in there which is still very real, but I tend to get quite sort of annoyed with playing a lot of the old stuff sometimes, just because I've listened to them so many times.
Funny you bring that up. I was sitting with somebody last night, and we were going through music videos, and I was showing her some of my favorite music videos of all time. I saw like some Diplo video, the Major Lazer, and I come in, and she was a trained dancer. And now she does Pilates, physical trainer, all this fun stuff. But I come in and say, okay, you want a song that's always going to make me smile. And I go in, I put on, like, always make me smile. Get me, if I'm in a bad mood, which I very rarely am in a bad mood, but get me out of a bad mood and make me happy. Keyword happy right there. I go, check this song. So I put on Pharrell Williams, Happy. And it starts out, and I'm all, did it. And she goes, oh, no, not this song. And I turn to her, and I'm like, what's wrong with this song? She goes, this song doesn't make me necessarily happy anymore, because when I was a dance instructor, all the middle school and high school girls requested this song that they want to start dancing to. So I heard it so much, it just burnt me out on it. And she goes, oh, it's okay, dear. I can tell that this song really pumps you up and it's really cool. I'll listen to it with you if you want me to. But she had gotten burnt out on the magic of that song, had been lost. It's so interesting. It's that I can... Yeah, when the magic's lost. And that can happen to a lot of people in the electronic music industry when you're just seeing the repetition of the same pattern happening over and over. And it's like, what's new here? I recently myself don't go out. Not that our scene isn't okay. Our local scene here isn't great, but I have said I'm not going out to my local nightclubs anymore after an experience I had in, have you ever heard of the Brooklyn Mirage in New York?
No.
Big, huge, awesome club. 2 big, huge rooms, beautiful place, 10,000 people. It kind of ruined my experience of nightclubs, where I said I only want to go to nightclubs outside of my city now and experience that kind of stuff. I haven't been able to travel. I've been kind of a homebody doing my show from home, but my passport is getting a lot of stamps this year. I got it renewed last year, the year before, and it's going to be going on a world tour. And nice. Really excited to see what's out there. But, you know, I was also talking with a friend of mine once, and she says, I went to Ibiza when I was 18 years old, and it ruined everything for me. Just set the bar so high. You come back, you're like, what's this? You know? So again, that's why I like festivals a little bit more than I do just the traditional nightclub, going to the same nightclub venue, because the festivals are always changing it up. There's different themes or different decorations, you know, different stage designs, lighting designs. It can kind of like, whoa, blow your mind. And then that's so. Yeah, for sure.
But I've also at times in my career gone exactly the opposite way as well. Because I started off playing big festivals, and they are great, but they're also a lot of work, you know, and it's a lot of hassle getting to them, and it's a lot of stress, you know, playing big shows like that. And you said Seattle now as well. I played in Seattle a few times, and I remember one really good tour. I can't remember the name of the club. Volume or
Volume was the club.
Foundation.
Foundation. Yeah, Foundation is one of. It is now called Sarajevo Lounge. Okay. Won't go into the history of why Foundation does not exist anymore, but cool. It is not there. They just reopened as Sarajevo Lounge, and then Aura Nightclub would probably be one of the clubs you'd be booked at. They just took over Sarajevo Lounge and expanded their whole club, and we're working. Okay, cool. We work closely. I still work closely with a lot of the clubs in town, because when the artists come to town, I like to do the on the ground, which we haven't been able to do this for a couple of years, is able to do the kind of the red carpet interview, behind the stage interviews, which we're looking really excited to start those back up again. But Foundation was one of the top, it was rated as one of the top nightclubs in the US. I know it made the charts there.
I had such a good night there as well because we were doing. It was very different to what I was used to doing. You know, I was used to playing big festivals. And one of the things with big festivals as well is more often than not you got an hour-long slot, which I'm not a huge fan of playing for an hour. I mean, if you don't want to play, then playing for an hour is fine. But most of the time, it's not enough for me to kind of get my point across. And that tour that I played in Foundations, we did a sort of open to close concept, which I'd never done before. I think I played 6 shows in the US, and every single show that I did was me being the first person in the nightclub and me being the last one to leave as well. It was a 6-hour set, and there's something pretty special about playing clubs in that sort of sense as well, when you've got a much smaller crowd, but they're with you the entire journey. And it gives you a lot of freedom as well. You know, like we were talking about, you know, people expecting you to play your own music. I could sort of allot an hour at the end of the set to kind of just do, you know, run through the motions, play a bunch of classic stuff and whatever. But then you get 5 hours to, you know, jump from like progressive house through to, you know, house and techno and all the way up to trance, and maybe even throw in some psytrance stuff at the end or whatever. So you kind of get this amazing progression that just happens through the night. And I've only really had that in clubs. So I mean, yeah, I get the attraction to festivals, but for me, clubs they've also got kind of a special place in my heart as well.
It was just recently where I mean, when I say recently, over 13 years of doing this show, just recently that I expanded our DJ sets from 1 hour sets to 2 hour sets, you know, and giving them that range and freedom, and, you know, trying to let them really develop a set and then posting that. I mean, it was really limitations over the years of getting a 2 hour file, which is going to be 3 to 4 gigabytes, 5 gigabytes in size. Sometimes when you shrink it down to something that's going to be easily digestible, that can be under a gig. You know, that when a person hits it on their phone and they're on 4G or back now it's all 5G, but hits a button, it's not going to stall or stop while it's playing. I don't have to break it into part 1 and part 2. I can now just put the whole 2 hour set on there. And I'm working with a developer right now. We just got an algorithm where he's able to get about a gig down to about 190 megabytes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he developed the algorithm himself. So we're really excited at that, which kind of brings me to my next topic of shrinking files down and everything. Have you looked into the NFT market? I mean, it's the huge buzzword right now. Are you doing anything with NFTs, looking at NFTs, following NFTs, staying away from NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I haven't, I'll be brutally honest. Like, I don't understand it enough to really have an opinion, but from what I do understand, I don't really have much of an interest in it at all. I don't know, especially the last couple of years, and again, like through COVID and stuff, you know, I've kind of spent a lot of time sort of just finding myself, if you will, and spending a lot of time doing like surfing and diving and things like that, and also just realizing that you don't need to constantly be owning stuff all the time. Experiential things for me are more important, and I don't know, somebody may correct me again, just saying that that's not what it's about, but I don't like this concept of having to put your stamp on everything. For me personally, it just doesn't sit right. But yeah, I've just never really sort of explored it enough really to have much more of an opinion about it.
And you mentioned something there about doing stuff and exploring and doing more outdoorsy kind of things. I know you have that wonderful, comfortable chair. I was going to ask you, what do you do to get out of that chair to stay in shape? Because it already looks like if there was one thing, but it looks like you have multiple things with an active lifestyle, from paddleboarding to hiking, swimming to walking the dogs. Where do you find the time to get such a great work-life balance? I mean, you mentioned you go to bed at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. You got to wake up to get the kids into school. And then you got to sit in that studio for 12 hours producing music. But where do you, I mean, wherever you're at, is that all in Cape Town, all those photos I've seen, is that how beautiful it is there?
Much. Yeah, no, I mean, we're super lucky. I mean, it's, I mean, compared to like a city in the States, it's kind of like San Francisco, I guess. And we've got a lot of stuff in very close proximity. I mean, a lot of the mountains are like literally 5 minutes up the road. I've got the beach 5 minutes down the road. So yeah, it really is like quite an epic playground for sort of anybody that's sort of vaguely outdoorsy. I mean, yeah, I never used to spend too much time in the water until recently. Like my wife's big on the ocean, and I used to surf as a kid, but I kind of didn't really do it for long. I did a lot of trail running and stuff on the mountains for quite a while. But sort of the start of COVID, I've gone completely like ocean bananas. So we started diving a lot. So, I don't know if you know that My Octopus Teacher movies. We spent a lot of time out there in those same kelp forests. And then my typical day, like if the conditions are decent, I get up, drop to do the school run, and 8 o'clock I'm in the water for 2 hours. I'll go surfing and then straight back to the office and get stuck in. And yeah, and then the weekends, I used to, another benefit of not touring as much now is I've never had weekends before. And weekends are work days. so the idea of like Friday afternoon being like a time that I can actually take off and not sit in the studio and actually get outside is quite novel for me, but enjoying it as well.
Are you into video games by any chance? Do you ever get a chance to stand and have a console? And or follow up to that, have you looked into virtual reality at all?
Yeah, I've looked at some of the tech in virtual reality. I mean, Steinberg does some pretty cool stuff with ambisonics and surround sound. They've got full support for Dolby Atmos now as well, which is coming out soon. I think I've got a beta version of it somewhere. But yeah, I mean, getting into virtual reality stuff, I mean, as far as the sound engineer is concerned, requires a bit of an investment from a monitoring standpoint, which I've just never really felt the need to do. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, virtual reality stuff, definitely, there's some pretty cool stuff. I don't know if it's quite there yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when Apple starts getting more into the whole AR thing, and Microsoft as well. I think they've got a whole bunch of pretty cool AR things. I'm not super excited about old Zuck and his Meta or whatever. It looks pretty stupid to me, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. They've actually been buying up quite a few companies that used to do VST plugins and sort of algorithms and things. And there's somebody I noticed the other day that just sort of discontinued their entire line because all their tech had been bought by Facebook. So there's definitely movement in that field, which would be interesting to see what happens there. And yeah, to answer your question, I mean, I don't play games as much as I used to. I used to be pretty big into them, but I don't have a console anymore. My last console I had was a PS4, yeah, PS3. No, I had a PS3. Sorry, yeah, PS3, and I spend way too much time in front of the TV. So I've got a pretty decent GPU in the studio computer. Yeah, so I'll every now and then I'll load something up.
It's what we're seeing happening in VR is kind of what I would relate to what I saw in live streaming almost 15 years ago. And we had internet radio stations before that. And then there was podcasting and then YouTube. And, I came from a public access television background of, picking up a VHS camera and going out and shooting it and then being able to air it and get it into, 250,000 homes is what our reach was. We weren't being viewed by 250,000 people, but if you turned us on and we were on TV at that time, and that was our distribution node. But to just see it come all the way up, we're seeing VR be that next level of. We actually just launched 2 VR nightclubs in alt space, cool. and we'll be launching more in other spaces as we develop. But you mentioned AR. And what Apple's developing, we know that the 5 majors, you look at it, we know Facebook has Aria, we know Apple's coming out with something, we know Google's going to come out with something again, Sony's probably going to come out with something, Microsoft's going to come out with something, eventually. And AR is wondering what that's going to be like, transforming the landscape of the physical space environment. I'm currently working with a team out of Arizona, and they're getting a new event space, and I'm coming in saying, hey, let me be your director of AR director of operations for AR for your space, and we can give people a very unique experience where we could, you know, it won't be holding the phone in front of them. They could do it like that, but if somebody has the glasses, comes in, puts it on, we'll turn we'll turn the ceiling into the Milky Way galaxy for them.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine the budget that you'd save as well if you did all your visuals and decorations in AR glasses, which would be pretty. I mean, it would be pretty sick. That I think if the tech was sort of popular enough. Is the other thing that I'm super keen on. I just haven't found the time to really delve into it, but I've been super impressed with Unreal at the moment as well, the Unreal 5 engine, which I think has got so much potential as well, for visual stuff and sort of interactive stuff as well. They've also got some pretty cool, I watched a few tech demos, some pretty cool algorithmic music stuff as well, where you can kind of, with a bit of code, you know, actually get things to change according to scenes and projects and so on as well.
Take a look at that.
You can actually, your music will just kind of grow according to what somebody's doing within your project. Which, I think that's going to start kind of molding together with music a lot more, which would be interesting to see. I definitely need to actually kind of grab that at some point and try and find some time to play around with it.
Absolutely, and you mentioned something right before that, and so should I. I need to try to stay up to date on all this stuff, but you know, it's just so much that just comes in and kind of choose and pick your path you're going to go down for a little bit. But you mentioned AR. We do what are called silent concerts, or you may have heard of them called before. They were called silent discos. And one of the things we can do is
that do parties like that as well.
Yeah, we can go to a park or set up and literally set a DJ up on a table, put a curtain in front of them. But in AR, I have 7 channel headsets. I could have 7 separate stages going on at the same time with an AR experience for each color of the channel. And you could just click and choose which color. And then you could have the DJ's name floating above them. You could have different creatures running around. You know, you got the purple stage, the green stage, the red stage, blue stage. And it's just going to be awesome. I think we're not there just yet. We're going to focus a lot on VR. From up until 2023, waiting to see when Project Aria comes out from Facebook and what Microsoft's going to release, and Apple's supposed to be releasing something by October this year. So fingers crossed.
I think the hardware has got to catch up still, but the exciting thing is, I mean, a couple of years back, I mean, the AR has been around for a while in its infancy, but one of the problems as well was media creation was always pretty hard for that. I mean, not everybody can do 3D modeling and things like that, but with stuff like Unreal now, it's just so, I mean, the guys make it look so easy with these massive libraries of stuff that's just basically free to stream or download. I mean, building the actual content for the AR stuff is just infinitely easier to do now compared to what it used to be. So I just got to wait for the hardware to catch up, basically. And when it does, I think it'll be a super interesting space to be involved in.
Absolutely. How do you envision your life 10 years from now?
Probably doing pretty much what I'm doing now, just less gigs. Well, I mean, I'm in a very comfortable space actually at the moment. I hate to talk about it because I do know a lot of people who struggled a lot during the last 2 years. But the whole COVID experience for me has actually been one of the better experiences in my life. It's just kind of forced me into a place to really kind of try different things and branch out. And I'm in a very comfortable space where, you know, like I spoke about early on as well, when you're doing shows and stuff, there's that sort of ego part of it. And with that removed, I've kind of given myself a lot of room to just, you know, be quite honest with myself and do things that I really love rather than, you know, trying to pay a bill at the end of the month from your tour schedule. So yeah, I mean, I'd probably just be doing the same thing. I think just more tech videos, working more with audio software. I'm constantly trying to get myself to study a little bit more coding and stuff to get a little bit more in depth into, you know, audio coding with Juice and that kind of stuff. But it's a slow process that for me. But yeah, I guess that's where I'd be in 10 years' time. I can't see myself ever not working in the audio industry.
And if you had one DJ that you could say is a one to watch, who would that be right now?
See,
I'll widen the range for you. One DJ or / producer.
Again, like I struggle to pick out one. But look, I think from like one of my favorite DJs still to this day, and I actually randomly watched I think it was a Boiler Room set of his the other day, which I really enjoyed, was DJ Max set, is Sasha. I mean, he's still an incredible DJ. I love the music choice as well. I've always been a massive fan. So yeah, if you get to go see Sasha, you're never going to be disappointed. From a DJ perspective. From a musical perspective, I don't know. I'm gonna get flamed for this, but I haven't really been all that inspired by sort of full-on music recently. Like trance and psytrance for me has kind of gotten a bit stale. I mean, that's just my experience. No disrespect to people that are still doing it, but the really interesting music is all happening in the progressive space for me. And then I've really fallen in love with sort of like liquid drum and bass and sort of, and then another genre which I had no idea existed, which I came across on a YouTube music playlist the other day, was Japanese hip hop. But there's not a lot of, it's sort of ambient lo-fi Japanese hip hop. I forget the name. I can't remember. I'd love to tell you what the artist was that I've been listening to, but I cannot remember. I might have it on my phone. But yeah, sort of any sort of down tempo stuff for me at the moment is really interesting. And then yeah, anything in the progressive space, melodic techno, melodic house, and progressive house stuff. Yeah.
And over the years, I'm sure you acquired a number of fans. Who would be if you could give a shout out to a number one fan of yours, who would be that number one person that really is fanatical about protoculture, that you could say, this person always shows up to my show, this person's always there for me? Who is your number one? Who would be your number one fan?
I'm not sure, but I will say a funny story. Quite a few years ago, a lady came up to my wife at a show at Glastonbury, and said to her, look, she's never done anything like this in her life, but she wants to ask permission if she can hurl a pair of her panties at me because she's a huge fan. She asked my wife if she could. She was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So yeah, I guess that's one of my bigger fans.
That's a pretty big fan right there. Get panties thrown on the stage, that is an honor. Well, they throw them on the stage or they throw them at you?
Yeah. They landed on the booth somewhere. I've actually got, my wife's actually still kept them afterwards and put them in a frame. They're lying around somewhere.
That is awesome. You travel a lot, and a couple last questions here. What airline should we all try to avoid, and why?
Oh, I won't get on Aeroflot, and not even considering the current situation, but I just refuse to fly with them. In Air France, I'm not a fan of at all. And stateside, I tend to stay away from United because I don't think I've ever left on time ever on a United Airlines flight. So yeah.
And will you be going to? Do you make it to the music conferences like ADE or Sonar or Winter Music Conference ever? Are you planning to go to those?
Yeah. I have. I've been a few times. I'm uncertain about what I'll be doing this year. I think I'm going to be in Amsterdam for a show, but 1 month before ADE. So I have my doubts that I'll go back again for ADE this year. And yeah, quite a few of the other ones. I was looking at doing NAMM. But NAMM's been cancelled, which, well, that's not a DJ industry really, it's some audio production stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I think this year it's still kind of hard to travel from South Africa, as being so far away. I mean, like our national airline had major issues as well. I've got to go to Brazil in August, and you cannot fly directly from South Africa to Brazil anymore. You have to go via the Middle East, which is a huge pain in the ass, but yeah, it's just from COVID. So the Brazilian, one of their main airlines has, gone bankrupt, and same for the South African airlines as well. So yeah, Yeah, and everything's, with the fuel prices and stuff, everything's very expensive as well. So it's still, I'm not sort of in high gear at the moment trying to, grab as many gigs as possible because it's still a nightmare. Somebody else that I know went to go and get a visa. Being South African, you need a visa for everywhere you go. And the Dutch consulate, the appointments, they were booked out until the end of July. So just with all the backlog. So, I mean, there's still major hurdles as far as like regular travel is concerned. So we'll see how things go.
Yeah, I was recently. We have tickets in space. We're going to ADE this year. I'm probably going to follow up with Winter Music Conference 2023. And one of my DJs, he's Belarusian. And so he has to renew he has his green card for the US, but he doesn't have his passport because he's not a US citizen. So he has to go through and apply for his passport through the Belarusian embassy to get that. Then he has to apply and get the visa so he can travel and go to Amsterdam. And I'm like, get on this now, put it in the process because I don't want to get down a month before. And then you're like, I can't get it. I can't go. So, the state of, and then everyone still has to apply for their travel or their work visas. All over again because they all expired, and that just is.
Well, that's. I mean, my US one as well. I've got to redo that again at some point. I've lost pretty much all of my miles. I think I had 3 gold cards and a silver card as well, and they're all gone. Just like years and years of accumulating miles. And
I'm surprised they wouldn't do something. Write a customer service letter. Say, hey, I want my points. It wasn't my fault.
Yeah, that's one of the bonuses with living in South Africa is like literally every flight you take is a seriously long flight. So you tend to build up the miles pretty quickly again. I think it takes me about 3 or 4 months normally to get to the gold status. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Nate, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Is there anything else you want to let our DJ Sessions fans know about before we let you get going back to work in the studio there?
Well, no, I mean, look, I'm working on loads of new music at the moment, so check out for new releases. I should have something coming out with Armada soon and some remix stuff that I've just finished as well. And then, if you guys are producers, go and check out the YouTube channel, mirrorlamusic.com or Mirrorla Music on YouTube. And then also the Sonic Academy stuff. I'm always constantly doing stuff there as well. So
awesome. Thank you so much. And again, you said a YouTube channel. Is there a generalized place? Where can people find out the most information about you? Stay up to date with what you got going on. What's the best social website?
Look me up on Instagram and Facebook. That's kind of where I post most of the time. Protoculture Official on Facebook, and I believe it's the same on Instagram as well.
Awesome. Again, Nate, aka Protoculture, aka Centrifuge, aka Shadow Chronicles. Thank you so much for coming on the DJ Sessions. It's morning for me, but it's probably like
evening for me. Yeah.
Evening for you over there. Thank you for coming on the show. It was a pleasure having you. We'll stay in touch.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Cheers.
You're very welcome. On that note, don't forget to go to our website, thedjsessions.com. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. Find us on Facebook. All the socials out there. Just go to our website. You'll find out everything. This is Darren, and that's Nate, coming to you live on The DJ Sessions Presents the Virtual Sessions. And you know what happens on The DJ Sessions? The music never stops.